All right, so I'm here with Gene Brode, and this is the special segment of our podcast and our little church initiative of meeting the member. And Gene has been a member for quite some time, and he's got quite a story to tell. And so I would love for you to get to know Gene through this special episode. And so, Gene, thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. And so a while ago, you basically brought to my attention that you had a desire to share your testimony. And, you know, God's brought you through a lot from what I know about your life. And I think that would probably take up the entire church service to get it all out. So hopefully in this episode, we can really tease out a lot of that in the details and everything, so people can get to know you in a different way.
Cool.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do right now for work and everything like that?
Yeah, sure. I'm a fire alarm designer.
Yeah.
And been doing that for 2.5 years. Been in the fire alarm industry since fire alarm and security since like 2003. Mm-hmm. So I've been doing this for almost 22 years now.
Yeah.
Which is 2003 is the special number, which we'll talk about later. But
all right, so 2003, we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Awesome. How long have you been married? What's your family look like?
Okay, well, I got my wife April and I have been married since 2005. So this October coming up will be our 20th anniversary. We have a son named Zach who's 15.
Yep.
He's going to be 16 in June, man.
He's growing up fast.
Yeah, it's. I knew it would. I prepared myself, but even if you mentally prepare for it, it's still, you just can't believe how fast time goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Man. And so you guys have always lived in Youngstown as a family, or Poland?
Yeah, we live in Poland.
Yeah.
We've April's from there. I'm from Northern Virginia.
Okay.
But we moved up here about a year after we got married, right around 2007.
Okay. Let's meet young Gene. How was your household growing up, and where did God start working in your life?
Okay.
Bringing you through. So let's go all the way back in time.
Okay. Well, I was known as Little Gene because my dad was Big Gene. But so
you're a junior.
I'm a junior.
All right.
And so let's see. When I was real young, my mom she has a Catholic background, a Catholic upbringing. My dad was Protestant-ish at the time, but they didn't really. We went to church for a little bit. We went to a Presbyterian USA church when I was real little. They had a daycare there, and I used to go there. And probably one of the few memories I have there was hearing the song "Go Tell It on the Mountain." But you know what's interesting? This is a little memory bubble. There's a line in there, I think, that says, "When I was a sinner," something, and I don't know the words, but I remember as a kid going, "When I was a sinner, was I a sinner? You know,
yeah.
What is this about?" But
yeah.
I never. A lot of times in my life, I think things and I don't ask the question. I just kind of like tuck it away. We only went to church for. I don't know how long it was in my little mind, but it seemed like forever. I couldn't wait to get out of the pew. And then I'll skip ahead to high school. In high school, teens are searching for stuff. I mean, you're either looking for a girlfriend or a boyfriend or meaning, or you're beginning to develop these skills to argue, which you really hone at home, which I did.
Yeah.
Arguing with my parents.
Good. You're a professional arguer.
But, we had a pretty good upbringing. I've got a sister, and we had, pretty pretty safe neighborhood. But probably like in middle school, I got into skateboarding.
Nice.
And then I went through a little awkward season of feeling like a poser, but I kept on skating and finally felt like I was really a skater, you know. Plus,
So,
I had
you were brought into the whole like realm of skateboarding. You wore skateboard shoes.
yeah.
Yeah.
I had Chuck Taylors.
Nice.
I had
Faithful Chucks.
this was back in the late '80s, early '90s, and I
Yeah.
pegged my jeans like all the other skaters.
Oh yeah.
It only lasted like 2 years,
And
then everything became baggy, huge and baggy, and then everybody's pants were falling down. But
I love the baggy pants.
I love
UFO
them too.
pants.
I didn't
Janko.
like them falling though, so I
Yeah.
always wore a belt because you can't do tricks with your pants around your knees.
Yeah. I still need to figure out the ollie.
Oh really?
Yeah.
I think I could still ollie.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it lately,
Yeah.
but I always hurt myself, so I haven't done it in a few years. But yeah, we I had a couple of best friends who I used to go skateboarding with, and one went to my high school, and when we both got our licenses around the same time, and so we'd drive all over the place. We'd drive to DC and everywhere and go skating, and at some point though, you know, my curiosity for God kind of slipped in there somewhere, and it was the spring of 1990, and I just out of random, I don't know how it happened, but I had a friend named Jeannie from Australia, and the two of us decided we should start checking out churches. And we went to like a Lutheran church, and I think we probably went to a Catholic church or Episcopal church. We just went to all these different places, and we afterwards we'd be like, yeah, that one was a little too stiff or whatever, you know. And then I don't know, that kind of wore off, I guess, or we got busy, and my friend Dave said, hey, I'm going to start going back to youth group.
Yeah.
And so we started going to his church youth group.
Yeah.
And it was cool. I heard a lot of the gospel. I had nice friends that I was surrounded by, and we ended up going to an amusement park, and they had a Christian singer there, and I wanted. In my memory, I don't know if it's correct, but my memory, I think Amy Grant was there. And during the concert, somebody shared the gospel. And it was a very simple, sort of like early 90s, Four Spiritual Laws kind of gospel that they basically said, if you pray this prayer, raise your hand. And I prayed the prayer. And I didn't raise my hand because I was not going to go stand in front of like all my peers and like a whole bunch of strangers and just I was like, they're going to call me up there.
Yeah.
So I told my youth pastor about it like when we got back, and that kind of began my journey.
Okay, so like 1990 time frame was a big time. I know I'm gonna date you, but how old were you?
I was 16.
16.
Yeah, so. Just around my 16th birthday.
Okay.
So
you and Dave were friends, going to youth group together.
Yeah, we would. We'd go to youth group, and then I'd go to church too.
Yeah.
But I was much more into. I don't remember a single sermon I heard. I just remember wanting to be social with everybody.
Yeah.
Then on into college, I got involved in Campus Crusade.
Okay.
I did have a little year after I graduated high school where I started, where I kind of, let me say this, staying a Christian in high school, in a public high school, for me, there were a lot of Christians there, but I wasn't friends with them. And I, sort of like, our school was pretty cliquey, probably like any school.
Yeah.
People were nice to me, but I wasn't in the different crowds, the different groups. I just stuck with the skaters and some other folks, and but I met a girl. I got distracted by her, and then it's like, I just had a really hard time just staying devoted in my Bible. And I'd read it, but I'd be like, I don't know what I'm reading.
Yeah.
Or I wouldn't know where to go, or I'd get bored or distracted.
Yeah.
So after I graduated high school, I within a week, I think, I got drunk for the first time.
Okay.
And a different friend of mine, another skater friend, we ended up going to one of my coworkers' houses and drank a few beers and got drunk. And this was '92. And so I don't remember what else happened that summer as far as drinking and stuff, but I was always, just say no to drugs. All my friends were. And so we stayed away from that. And then, I don't know, I guess my freshman year of college, I just kept on partying. And I was really depressed that semester. I didn't want to go to school. I was so burnt out from high school that but the pressure was to go to school right after you get out of high school. So I went to college.
Yeah.
And then I took the spring. I got a .036 GPA that semester. Not even 1.1.
Wow.
It was bad.
Wow.
So I flunked out that semester. Went and worked with my dad for about 6 months and decided I'm going back to college. But that whole time I was, going out and partying and stuff and going to, was I old enough to drink? I don't think I was, but we drank anyway. In the fall, I met this girl named Julie McCaffrey, if she ever hears this. She
Shout out to Julie.
She was the most amazing, bubbly, in love with Jesus Christian that I had met up to that point. And she invited me to go to Campus Crusade, and I was like, all right, I'll come check it out. My roommate and I went and checked it out in the first semester, and then I was like, yeah, it's not really for me. And then, but the next year, after a year of partying and all that, I went there, and they had I went at the end of the semester. I waited all semester long to finally go back. And they were like, I met all these people for the first time, and they were like, hey, there's a conference in Philadelphia. You should come for Christmas. And I'm like, okay. So I went. That's where I learned about Bill Bright and his vision for the gospel. And they offered a little thing, if you want to rededicate your life, you can do that now. And so that's what I did. And off I went. I was, gung-ho. I used to share my faith with everybody.
You're on fire.
Yeah. A couple years later, I went to a summer project in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
You're there all summer with Campus Crusade. And working a full-time job and sharing the gospel in the evenings and on the weekends.
Yeah.
That was an amazing experience. And then, the director of our group at that time said, there's a statistic that, I don't remember what the number was, but so many of you won't be walking with Jesus in 10 years.
Yeah.
And I was like, really? I looked around, and I'm like, well, I will be,
Yeah.
But who? It's sort of like, who's going to betray you, Lord? Is it me? But and I haven't, sadly, I didn't keep up with anybody. Maybe for a couple of years, but I don't know where anybody's at anymore. But so that was '94. And believe it or not, in less than 10 years, I was one of those people who was not walking with the Lord.
Wow.
And a couple years later, I figured out what I wanted to do in college.
Yep.
I studied.
Applied yourself.
Yeah. I started to. I said, I'm going to study Spanish. So
Nice.
that's going to be my major. Partly because I loved it, and partly because I didn't know what else to do.
Okay.
the idea of business sounded miserable to me.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'll either be a teacher or a translator or something.
Okay.
And but didn't really. That's about as far as I went. I thought about it, and I did just never. I should have just done it, but I graduated with a bachelor's in Spanish.
Nice.
So, but I graduated in '98. It took me 6 years, but I took some time off and stuff. But in '96, I went to Venezuela.
Yep.
Studied there and got fluent. Had a blast. But I mean, I went down there with all these intentions and ideas of what God was going to do through me, and my friends through Campus Crusade were like, "Oh, God's going to do amazing things." I mean, they built it up in my head, and I was just like, "This is fantastic." And I really, at that time, all I wanted to do, actually, once at that point, was I wanted to go be a missionary in Latin America. So, fast forward a little bit. I visited a couple of churches while I was down there, and there was like such a very almost dead spiritual life down there. It was, I mean, there were Christians down there. I met some people from YWAM, a couple who were serving there from New Zealand, and I'd see them on the buses and stuff, or see them around town and say hi. But I'd go visit their facility for fellowship, and I went there a couple times and nobody was there.
Okay.
Then I'd go to church. I went to visit this one Pentecostal church, and they were speaking Spanish so fast, man. I wasn't yet that fluent, and I couldn't understand the sermon.
It might have been gibberish. I don't know.
Could have been. But afterwards, I stuck around. I was like, well, I'll try to meet some people, and like nobody talked to me.
Oh, okay.
And so I just kind of wandered away, got back on the bus, went home. Another time I went to a different church, and I was waiting outside with a few other people who were waiting for church to open, and nobody ever came to open the church.
Okay.
So it was like, after that, I was like, I'm going to give up, because there's nothing, I don't know where else to go. And this was obviously before internet. So I had a little guidebook.
There you go.
But it was like, I don't know. There were places that as an American, you really shouldn't go, and I think I just wasn't sure of myself. So
you were out in Venezuela.
I was in Venezuela from January to May, and didn't even go to church more than didn't hear a sermon for all that time, and then I eventually stopped reading my Bible.
Yeah,
and then, and everybody knew, all my classmates knew that Gene doesn't drink. But I got depressed. I got lonely, depressed. I picked something. I got Montezuma's Revenge or something. I don't know. I ate something at the beach once, and it tore me up for a week. And I was so bad, I just wanted to go. I almost went home.
Yeah.
I almost just quit the semester. And so my depression got the better of me, and by the end of that semester, we were out to dinner at like a Chinese restaurant, and I was like, I'll order a beer. And I'm drinking a beer, and one of the other kids goes, I thought you didn't drink. And I go, well, it's just one. And when I got back to the States, I was off. I just went straight to my two best buddies who weren't Christians. Started drinking with them. I went to church. I went to two different Baptist churches that I had attended in high school and college. I visited them once each, and I just looked around. I felt so uncomfortable. Nobody was there. Nobody, it was just like, eh.
Yeah.
And who knows what was going through my mind? I can't remember, but I basically said, well, I'm not going to go to church anymore.
So let's pick up on the dates. Where are you at in like years here?
This was like summer of 96.
96? Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot happened in 96. Venezuela happened in 96, January to May, and then you came back to the States, and so now you're in summer. So, would you consider yourself a Christian at that point? Do you believe that you were?
I believed at that point that I was.
Yeah, but you were just kind of just wandering, rebelling against the Lord and trying to...
Yeah, I guess I would have at that point, like I think the phrase that was pretty big then was just backslider.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still a word that people use, but I just figured that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
So, and my doctrine, my theological understanding of salvation and a lot of the things that you and I have talked about, perseverance of the saints and things like that, that I guess the churches I went to sort of talked about losing your salvation. And
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I never really, I don't know if I thought about it much.
Okay. Like looking back in hindsight, you might say, yeah, I still was a Christian. But at that point, you probably thought you weren't.
Yeah, and I'm sure there were times where I questioned it.
Yeah.
But I would repent, but it was like just me and God kind of confession.
Yeah.
So in 97, still... there was another period, 96, 97. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life.
Yeah.
Now that I'm not, I don't want to.
We're out of college.
Oh, and part of it was that before I went away to Venezuela, I got really burned out doing campus ministry.
Okay.
And it was like I was in our campus director's office one day and I just like broke down in tears. School was busy. I worked a part-time job. I was doing ministry. I was leading a Bible study. I was doing evangelism. Over that summer, I think nothing was going on. So I said, hey, we'll start a weekly Bible study, which I led. Mm-hmm. But it was just like and then I got my non-Christian friends who were like, come bowling or come do this. Go see a show. And, it was like homework always came last.
Okay. Yeah.
So I almost like when I came back from Venezuela, that was part of it was like, I don't want to get back involved. I'll get too stressed out again.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the following year, I just kept, basically my focus switched onto, it's always been on girls.
Yep.
But, I had a couple of girlfriends, still was drinking, going to lots of parties. But in 97, and I always avoided the marijuana and the marijuana. These kids and the marijuana.
The marijuana.
I was at a party and one of my high school friends was there, and my friend, another friend of mine was there. Mm-hmm. It was his townhouse, and I was on the deck and we're all just hanging out in a circle. Somebody brought a joint out, and it went around. Came to me, somebody handed it to me. I said, nah, let it go by. Comes around a second time, let it go by. The third time I looked at these people and I said, you know what? They're not living in the gutter. Their lives aren't, falling apart. They're just smoking a joint. I was like, maybe I'll try it. And, I think I took a couple hits on it. Felt kind of tingly and good. And that was about it. I was like, oh, that was no big deal. And then very shortly after that, I went back to my friend's townhouse to go see him, and he wasn't there, but his cousin was there, and his cousin was a big smoker. So, and around that time, I found out all this time that my one friend whose house it was, he was one of my skate buddies from a different school. We were always anti-drug, and here he was just doing it behind my back because he didn't want me to, I guess he didn't want to let me down or didn't want me to get tempted or I don't know what. But so we became like,
bad influences on each other.
Yes. So we just, and but I went over to his house when he wasn't there, and his cousin's like, here, you want to smoke a joint? We're watching Sports Center, and I'm not a sports fan. And I think I sat there for like 2 hours watching Sports Center, and it was just like, this show is really cool.
Oh, jeez.
So come 98, I graduated college.
Nice.
Went, got my first sort of a dream job, working at a Center for Outdoor Education.
Okay.
In a local park.
Yeah.
Well, there were some hippies there.
Okay.
And they had the good marijuana.
Huh.
And so I learned about that and began to get really more interested in pot.
Okay.
And come, then I think by '99 I started teaching, substitute teaching for the public schools.
Okay.
And basically, I guess at some point over that summer, or 98, 99, I started seeing a psychologist on campus. Because
why were you seeing it?
I was depressed.
Okay.
I started dealing with some of those issues that I had for a few years, but...
Do you think you were like medicating your depression with substances?
Well, at first I was just like, this is the coolest feeling ever.
Mm-hmm.
But probably, I think probably what was going on was I was probably medicating by partying. Just escape. I've like
just wanted to escape everything.
Yeah, just not deal with problems now. We'll deal with those later.
Yep.
So in '99, the smoking increased, the drinking increased, and by the end of the summer, my psychiatrist was like, I went on medicine, and she's like, oh, why don't you try quitting marijuana and see if you feel better? Okay. Mm-hmm. So a month later, I go back to visit her, and she's like, how'd it go? And I go, well, it didn't, And she's like, why don't you just try quitting altogether? And I was like, I don't think I can. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I ended up in rehab, which was like a shocker.
You couldn't quit marijuana.
Yeah. It was. I didn't want to.
Yeah.
So I go to rehab.
Wow.
And I'm like, I'm just here to quit smoking pot. I'm going to keep on drinking. And they're like, Gene, if you drink, you're probably going to lower your inhibitions and smoke. And I go, okay, well, that's good enough. That's a good point. So I stayed sober for like a year. Then I don't know, there was a party.
Yeah.
And I went and drank one night and put another year and a half together.
Mm-hmm.
And things were going pretty good at that point. My life was getting straightened around. I was
out of rehab. We're teaching again.
I was 99, 2000. Yeah, actually, at that point, I got my first full-time job at a high school.
Nice.
Teaching Spanish. So
nice.
And actually, that night I went out and got drunk. That one night, I remember telling my mentor, "How's your weekend?" I go, "Well, I got drunk." She goes, "Good," because I was so stressed.
Oh.
And I was like, "Not really."
It's not the direction you'd like to take.
Yeah. So, I tacked together another year and a half of sobriety.
Yep.
And I ended up at the beach with my family, and one of my family members had a big blunt that he was going to go smoke, and I'm like, where are you going to go smoke a blunt, man? And I got this crazy, just out of nowhere, harebrained scheme. I said, well, I'll drive you somewhere. We'll drive in the car, and you can, that way you won't be, I don't know, getting arrested, walking around smoking pot. So we just drove around in my car with the windows up.
Oh, boy.
And, and the next day, I don't know if it was the next day, maybe like when we got back home, I was like, you hear all these stories in AA, and the next day I said, you know what, I never smoked every day. I wonder what that's like. Because honestly, I never got as much as I wanted before that. I always wanted more, but the availability or the job or whatever it was that I was doing just I couldn't do it. Or the connection, I didn't have the connection for a lot of the time until I started at that one job. So I said, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna I'm just going to start. I figured out a way to lie to my family, my friends, and I had a sober roommate. And I was like, I can make this work. I won't smoke in the house. I won't tell anybody. I'll keep going to AA. I'll keep collecting sobriety chips.
Oh, dear.
And it'll just look totally normal. And that'll be my cover.
Yeah.
So I changed my best friend's name. I used his middle name because I'd already told people, hey, I used to smoke with this guy. And so instead of giving him my friend's his first name, I said, oh, yeah, it's just Thomas. Yeah, I'm hanging out over at my friend's Thomas's house. Oh, okay.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I smoked every single day.
Huh.
And within a few...
No one knew.
Nobody knew until about 11 months in when I crashed my car one night.
Okay.
And I went to go see The Matrix with my sister. And I was so bummed because her boyfriend was in a couple of AA meetings with me. And I was like, well, I can't get high. And I wanted to get high and watch The Matrix. And I think that's one thing I've never done. So that's good. I don't want to have that. That's not on my bucket list.
Yeah.
But it was at that time.
Yeah. Well, you got it out of the way, so there you go.
Yeah, so we went and saw a movie, and then I went home, and I was like, well, my parents are out of town. I'll leave my townhouse. I'll go stay at their place, and I'll get high by myself.
Okay.
So I rolled a joint, got in the car, and I used to smoke and drive everywhere. It's so dangerous. I mean, I'd even roll up next to a stoplight, next to a cop at the stoplight, with stuff on me, and it's like trying to play it cool. So I took a little back road, and I'm puffing on this joint, and my eyes start to crisscross, and I'm like fighting them. I'm like just trying to keep them open, and the next thing I realize, I'm crashing into something,
no.
And I had no idea what it was. The airbag fills up. The airbag like puts out like this dust, so there's just white powder going through the whole almost like cockpit. That's probably what it felt like.
Oh, jeez.
So, the thought occurred to me like, oh my gosh, I just hit somebody. And so I made it to the end of the street. I'm trying to push this airbag down. It was really comical looking back. I'm pushing the airbag down that's coming out of my horn, but every time you tug on it, it goes meep, meep. And it's like 1:30 in the morning, 2 in the morning.
My goodness.
And I'm in a neighborhood, driving down the road. Smoke is coming out of my engine. My car sounded like a biplane that had been shot down. It was like, the radiator was all messed up.
Jeez.
I passed by. I turned around, went back home. I slowed down and saw, oh my gosh, I hit a tree. Everybody's okay. I just hit a tree. Drove home. Came up with a lie. Yeah. And then I squeezed another 3 weeks out of that. I just told everybody that I fell asleep. I was driving late. Got tired, which was a bad habit of mine. But,
Yeah, you know the truth. God knew the truth.
Yeah. So
your sin finds you out.
Yeah, it did. 3 weeks later, and this is the last night, it was 2003.
This is the big year for you.
Yeah, Memorial Day. It was a Sunday before Memorial Day. I'm at my friend's house. I think we'd been drinking on and off throughout the day. I don't really remember being drunk. I know, and after all his family went to bed, we started smoking pot. And it was probably like around midnight that he and I got into this argument and stuff. And he was attacking my integrity, which I had none. Yeah. But I was still trying to defend my little bit of whatever I thought I had.
Gotcha.
So I said, you know what? I'm done with this conversation. I'm going to go to sleep on your couch because I'm not in shape to drive. And we can talk tomorrow. So I was on the couch, and he was drunk, I think. He comes inside a little bit later. Come on, we gotta go talk, And I'm like, oh gosh, here we go. So we start talking again. We start arguing. I come back in the house. It's like, I'm going to bed. I'm done talking. And he grabbed my shirt, or my jacket, my sleeve, and I was so livid that when he pulled me, it was like automatic. I don't know how this happened, but he was always a stronger guy than me. But I let him pull me into him, and as I did, I just slammed him in the face.
Wow.
And we started fighting, and kind of went across the kitchen counter, all the glasses and stuff went everywhere, and then I ended up on top of him.
Yeah.
And I was trying to strangle him to death.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's
like rock bottom for you.
Yeah, I remember this because it was so real. I shouted at him. I said, I'm going to smite you. I used some colorful language.
Yeah.
But I remember there was a look on his face, like he was struggling to get up. And I felt like I had complete control over his life or his death. And in my mind, I was going to kill him. I was not going to let up until he was dead.
Wow.
And it wasn't even an argument. It wasn't like, hey, you took my girl. He was married. His wife, his family was there. Her grandparents were visiting. They were asleep. They had a newborn. I'm in the kitchen,
About
calling
to take his life.
Yeah. And his wife pulled me off of him, and I was like, oh my gosh, So one of the other friends there gave me a ride home. I made the mistake of leaving my wallet and my keys there. So the next day I had to go face him and get my stuff back. And my dad was like, I told my dad, I said, I need to confess some stuff to you. And I told him the whole truth, and he said, okay.
You told him about using and everything, just laid it all out.
Yeah, I just didn't want to keep. It was too hard to keep lying, and two things were absolutely certain in my mind. I was either going to kill myself accidentally, like by wrecking my car, or I was going to kill somebody else, either accidentally or with that obscene rage that was going through me. So I went back to AA. I was like, I don't know what else to do, and then I met I met a friend named Ken. Well, actually, I'd already known this guy Ken from AA. Ken is one of my. I love him, man. He loves the Lord so much. But we'd already known each other from AA, and I knew how much he loved the Lord and how much he had a heart for sharing the gospel with people. And so he starts sharing more tracts with me and CDs and sermons and stuff, and I'm listening to this stuff, and I'm like, a few months in, I'm like, Lord, I don't know if I'm saved. Because, Jesus said, you'll know us by our fruits. No one who loves the Lord goes on sinning. Now, David sinned. David was with Bathsheba.
Yeah.
For at least 9 months or maybe a year or something, he was away from God until Nathan came to him.
Yeah.
So if he had died in that time, I don't know. That's hypothetical. Who knows? If I had died, I don't know. I was convinced though that I was going to go to hell.
Yeah.
If I continued living like that, and I said, I don't know what I was.
Yeah.
I believed at that time that I was really saved, but here I am today. Here's what I've done. Please save me. Please, forgive me. So I repented, and I also told the Lord, I said, I've been through AA. I've gone to meetings. I've gone to church, but I've surrendered only like 3/4 of my life to you. I'm giving you everything. And so I mean, like, I gave him all the dirty stuff.
Yeah.
And then about a year later, then what was different this time though was I started helping other guys
Okay.
who were alcoholic.
So that was all within the sort of the context of AA.
Yeah. So I got about, and Ken and I were talking, and we're like,
Was he your mentor?
no, he was just
Or
like
your
a friend.
sponsor? Yeah.
No, well, we were just like friends.
Okay.
But I started going to a Christian recovery group as well.
Okay.
I think Celebrate Recovery.
Okay.
So I was going to AA and Celebrate, and then Ken and I were like, man, AA is really not biblical. I mean, I know it's founded on biblical principles. It's a good place to go. It's helpful for some people, but
It quotes Jesus often, but it doesn't say that it's Jesus.
yeah,
Quote.
some people literally said your higher power could be a chair, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
So I got more involved in this Friday men's group at a church,
Okay.
but I was still going to AA because I just, there wasn't enough content there to help me think through some doctrinal stuff, so.
Gotcha.
And I felt like my life depended on it. So I started working the steps. I started really getting honest. I confessed everything to my sponsor and tried to keep helping other people, going to meetings and stuff. Nice. And it felt very restrictive at times. And it was kind of like, at times that restriction was kind of annoying, but it was a lifeline. So I met my wife a year later.
Nice.
We got married about a year later than after that.
Yep.
And by that time, I was going to 5 meetings a night, or
Okay.
5 meetings a week. And I'm a newlywed, but I'm like, my wife from out of town is, spending evenings alone because I can't get my stuff together.
Gotcha.
And so I think I had like a couple years sober by that time we got married. And then we decided that we'd move here to Ohio. I'll save that for another day, but basically we ended up moving here. I was kind of happy to leave AA.
Yeah.
I was very back into evangelism.
Nice.
So I knew that I knew things were going to be okay when I moved here. I wasn't afraid of, I didn't know, I still to this day, we've been here since 2007. I have no idea where to get marijuana. Well, except maybe now that it's legal.
Yeah, it's completely changed the game.
Yeah,
hearing these horror stories with you even driving and knowing that people are driving all over, using like that even though they're not supposed to, it's just brings you into the reality, like how dangerous it actually is.
Yeah, and it's, I think it's a mindset though. Like some people can control their drinking. And one of the guys I sponsored, he had a stocked bar at his house, but it wasn't a temptation for him. His temptation was going out in public, and he would go from bar to bar and drive home drunk. So even after he got sober, I was like, man, I don't know if it's a good idea for you to keep that bar. And he goes, it's not a problem, Gene. I'm like, okay. Yeah. So, and he stayed sober. Well, I think he's still sober.
Yeah.
But some people, I don't know, we all have quirks or mindsets where we say, I'm not going to cross this line, or I don't want to cross this line, maybe. For me, when I'm under the influence, like, it doesn't matter what the lines are or where they are. I don't care. I'll just go and cross them and worry about the consequences another day.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous. It's also, gosh, it's so rebellious, It's like, I never thought of myself as a bad boy or anything, but it's kind of what I became.
Yeah. So tell me about, let's talk about the evangelism, igniting. you're married. How did that shape out and grow? You had a child sometime in the early
2005.
2005.
Yeah. I'm sorry. No, 2009. I got married in 05. He was born
Yep.
in 2009.
Yep.
And we moved here because it was so expensive in Virginia.
Yeah.
And it was busy, and this was like right around when the real estate was peaking.
Yeah.
And it was like, I had this crazy, like, I forget what they call them, like an ARM mortgage, where I was basically paying just interest only at the time.
Yeah.
And that was about to end. It was sort of like, I think, to get people into a home, you pay a little bit, then you get yourself established, and then you can pay pay a little more, start paying down the principal. Yeah. So we were in that when we sold the house and moved up here, and a year later it was like the house was worth way less than what we sold it for.
Okay.
Had we stayed, we might have probably ended up going. I might have gone bankrupt. I probably would have lost the house. But we moved up here. I got involved in. We started going to. Well, we really struggled to agree on a church or find one that we both really loved. Then we found Sovereign Grace up here, Pastor Matt Mager.
Yeah.
And that's where my next light bulb went off.
Nice.
So it was like I started taking all those weird feelings I was having about AA and wanting to be biblical, and I found it. It was like he really talked me through some biblical concepts, and so that was really exciting. We would go evangelizing once a week down at the bus station.
Yep.
And it was just exciting because I get to share my faith. I was staying clean. I was with men who were godly and supportive, and
nice.
So that was a really wonderful time, and then Zach was born in 2009, and that was amazing.
Yeah.
He was 3 weeks. 3 weeks passed in like a breath. I remember holding him the first day going, this is going to go by so fast. And in 3 weeks, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe 3 weeks passed.
Yeah.
And then 10 months and a year, and now he's almost 16.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's crazy to think of you telling your testimony, you at being 16 years old, and the things that you were just going through when you were 16, not your son 16.
Yeah.
It's weird.
And it's really, we can keep our ideals, we can hold these things, like I was like very anti-drug, but I think if I could go back, or if I could tell my younger self something, I would say just guard your heart. I tell that to Zach all the time. Guard your heart, because stuff's going to come at you. Life is going to happen. Things are going to not go your way, and how you receive it is, you want to receive it well. You want to deal with it well and biblically, So,
well, praise the Lord for everything that God has brought you through. I think you're a testimony of God's grace, His perseverance, His patience. And He's kept you safe. Ultimately, He's preserved your life to help shape other people, to spread the word and spread the good news of how you've been impacted, particularly by His grace, and I think you're a testimony of just how God keeps us, even in the days that we're rebellious children, right?
Yeah.
What an amazing story.
Yeah, he really is gracious. It's life's so delicate. We're not guaranteed another breath,
Very fragile.
and I just kept that in mind because we don't know. If someone's out there and they're like on the fence, or they're struggling with their sin, or they don't want to repent, or they don't want to believe but they're close. It's like we don't know how much time we have left.
Yeah.
And I love what Ray Comfort said. Ray Comfort really was big in my over the last 20 years for
Yeah.
me. And it's we're not guaranteed. I forget how I was gonna quote him, but he
Just
says,
like the frailty of life,
yeah,
things like that. Just we're not promised tomorrow.
yeah, we have. I mean, if you count like how many years, like I'm 50. If I live to be 77, that's 27 more years.
Mm-hmm.
Times 52 for each week. I'm not gonna do the math.
Yeah.
But that's how many weekends you have left, and it shrinks. The number gets smaller than
like
just
perspective. You realize, Ray Comfort has helped you realize like the value of time.
Yeah, and I just sharing these stories with you is a good reminder for me, because I've kind of forgotten a lot of that. It's so easy to get complacent.
Yeah. Amen.
So.
Well, thanks for joining us and everyone viewing and listening. So I'm looking forward to see what God does in the future, in the coming years. And he's not done with you as long as you have breath in your lungs. And Gene the evangelist is coming at you. So it's good to have you as a friend first and foremost, and brother in Christ, and fortunately a church member at Steel Valley, and it's awesome. We've been through a lot.
Yeah, so we have been. It's been real good being here with you.
Yeah. So, all right. Until next time, we'll be signing off. See everyone later.